We are going to go ahead and get started. Before we start the program, I'm going to invite our Spanish translator up to the microphone to let folks know who are in the room if there are some needs for translation supports that he is available. So if you would please, sir, come on up to the microphone.
Hola, mi nombre es David Salazar. Yo voy a ser el intérprete del día de hoy. Por si acaso hay gente aquí que va a necesitar que yo les diga todo en español, yo voy a estar sentado allá atrás y mi nombre es David Salazar. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for coming out tonight. I appreciate you spending some time with us this afternoon. My name is Chelsea Crawford. I am the Chief of Staff at the Tennessee Department of Education, and I'm very excited to be able to talk with you all tonight about an important topic. I know it's important to us at the State Department and certainly important to all of us here in the room and those who are watching online and folks all across the state. I just wanted to thank our Spanish translator for being here. We also have an ASL interpreter to make sure that folks can access the conversation. But what we are really here tonight to do is hear from you. I mentioned that we've been talking with folks all across the state. This is actually the 9th of 10 town halls that the department has been hosting. We are finishing up our public town hall schedule tomorrow afternoon in Shelbyville, but are very excited to be here in Nashville tonight with such a great crowd. I know you all have brought a lot of things to share with us, and I'm excited to hear them. Before we get into kind of the true public comment portion of this evening, I'm going to talk just for a few minutes to give everybody in the room kind of a baseline understanding of what it is we are here to discuss and what we want to hear from you about. And so we'll go through that, and then I'm going to walk us through exactly kind of how the public comment section of this event will go. I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. I will call your attention now to the QR code that's up here on the slide. There was also a QR code when you signed in this afternoon. This is a way to go ahead and secure your spot in line if you would like to provide some public comment this evening. I do believe that we'll have opportunity for folks to chime in more than once if you would like to. And so just know that that is not necessarily required for you to be able to sign up to speak. We're going to start with folks who have already signed up. But then as the conversation progresses and you hear comments and you want to add to, chime in, or kind of build upon, feel free to hold up your hand and we'll bring a microphone to you. So let's go ahead and dive in on the topic at hand. The department is coming across the state and we are getting ready to implement a law that was passed a number of years ago. When we get ready to implement this law, as we are having these conversations, we'll continue to have these conversations. I want to make sure just to state that we are grounded in a goal and a belief that we want all students to achieve a high quality education at the state agency. That's what we use as our North Star. I know that's what our district schools, teachers, and even family members are kind of using as their North Star as well. We want the best for our children in Tennessee, and that's really our goal and our approach to this conversation. I mentioned that we are here to implement a law. That law is really, it was set forth by the Tennessee General Assembly a number of years ago, and what it's intended to do is put forth a letter grade system for schools. So just like you see students bring home a report card that has an A, B, C, D, or F, there is this piece of legislation that is now in state code and state law will implement the same type of letter grade system for our schools. I mentioned that this has been passed a number of years ago. I'm going to go to this slide just to show you kind of a sense of the timeline between when this law was passed and where we are today. It was passed in 2016. It was intended to go into effect for the first time in the 17-18 school year. Of course, as we think back, that's been a while, and we have had a couple of little things along the way that have delayed the rollout of this piece of legislation, the implementation of this law. I know that there are a lot of folks kind of from our schoolhouse community. We've got directors of schools and other district staff and teachers in the room. I think we all remember maybe too well some of the challenges that we had a while back with some of the online testing administration for TCAP. That created one delay. Of course, just in very recent memory, the pandemic, of course, created other delays in terms of being able to use data for systems like this. This year, we do not have any type of off-limits parameter around data, and so it is time for our agency to be able to implement this law for the very first time. As we go through the evening, we'll go forward one slide. As we go through the evening, I want to put this up here just to kind of give us some context about the types of things that we want to hear from you about. So when you think about our agency's charge to develop a letter grade system, we've had conversations for years, and especially over the last couple of months, about what should make up that letter grade system. When we think about an A or a B or a C or a D, and we know this rating system is intended to communicate to parents, to the public, to our community members, what do we as Tennesseans believe should be constituted, should be incorporated, should be a part of that letter grade system? Now, the legislation and the law calls for two things that must be required when we think about creating a calculation. We know that academic achievement must be incorporated. It is required and named specifically in the law to be a part of this calculation. We also know that growth is required and named specifically in the law to be a part of this calculation. Those two things are aspirational goals, I think, that all of our schools and our teachers and our students strive to meet and achieve, but they are a little bit different. So when we think about academic achievement, we think about the Tennessee academic standards, where our teachers come together and others come together to develop rigorous expectations for what our students need to know in a particular subject area in a particular grade level. Students can master those standards, they can meet those standards and achieve proficiency, or they might need some additional help to be able to achieve the performance level that we would expect them to have, again, in that particular subject matter area at a particular grade level. That is different from growth. When we think about academic achievement, we could imagine a proficiency level, some level on an academic achievement scale. If we kind of think about proficiency and set that aside, and we say no matter where the student is when they come into a classroom, how much have they improved over a school year, that kind of notion of growth can apply in the school context as well. So just like a student can grow, a school can grow as well, and they generate a growth score. So those two components are required by law to be a part of this calculation. The law also calls for other indicators to be determined by the department, and so that's kind of a third bullet point when you think about the letter of the law and what it says in Tennessee Code. We have opportunity to include other types of metrics, other types of indicators that represent priorities as determined by the public input we're collecting from Tennesseans all across the state. Previously, in earlier conversations, there are some examples up here on this slide of the types of things we have thought about. When considering how to create a calculation for letter grades for schools, of course, we can think about some contextual pieces that might make things different from campus to campus. Chronic absenteeism and ELPA are two of the examples that you will see up here, that English language proficiency as well as time away from their teacher in a classroom. When you think about chronic absenteeism, I think, know that when a student is not in front of their teacher for the entirety of the time that they could be, they are not going to access as much learning as they could. And so it's a real important thing that children come to class and come to sit in front of their teacher to be able to absorb that learning. When they are not there, especially at high rates or kind of chronic out of school rates, that can create some challenges that we could consider when creating a calculation for a rating system for our schools. Similarly, English language proficiency up there. We think about our growing communities in Tennessee as our demographics change and our population grows and becomes more diverse. We know that there are some schools that have higher concentrations of students who have not yet learned the English language. And so as they are trying to access academic content in a different language, they're also trying to master the English language itself. And so that's kind of another example of the types of things that could provide context from campus to campus and could or should be considered when we're thinking about developing that calculation for a letter grade system. There are also some things we could think about in terms of types of schools, right? When we think about elementary school students and middle school students and high school students, we may decide that there are different objectives or different priorities for high school versus middle school versus elementary school. Along the way of these town halls, we've heard a lot about what matters in high school or what matters in elementary school, and could or should those things be included in a calculation for this letter grade system. In a high school space, those things could include graduation rate. They can include an indicator of readiness, a student's readiness to be successful after high school graduation. We've heard about Ready Graduate Indicator, which is a little bit more of a technical term. I know it's familiar to many of our administrators here in the room. We've also heard about ACT. We've heard about some of the CTE completions. We've heard a lot of ideas about what indicators matter in the high school space. We've also heard some things, for example, in the elementary school space, we've heard some interesting comments about the reading proficiency of students, and especially by that third grade marker. We've heard interesting comments about the types of supports our elementary school students could receive, for example, through RTI services or through tutoring services. So those are just some examples to kind of get us thinking about the types of things that could go into an A through F letter grade calculation. This list up here is not exhaustive, it's not comprehensive, and in fact, I hope that you all come up with other ideas that matter and are important to you from your vantage point as a stakeholder and a Tennessean. But I will just make a quick point that the only two up here that are required to be included by law are achievement and growth, and everything else is up for discussion. So as we move into the public town hall comment period, I'm going to put this slide up here just with some prompts and some types of questions to probe your thinking. Of course, we want to hear from you about what are your priorities. What are the things that you believe are important that could or should be included in an A through F letter grade system? We are going to give everybody a few minutes to provide some comment. These questions are just examples of the kind of thing to prompt your thinking. But what we're going to do is actually move into the public comment period of this event at this point in time. So here's how it's going to work. I've got my handy dandy timer up here, and everyone who's signed up to speak will have 3 minutes to speak. As I mentioned before, I think we're going to have time to hear multiple comments from the same person. If you would like to chime in more, that seems like something we'll be able to get done this evening. But when your name is called, we're going to bring you a microphone, and if you would, at the very beginning of your comment, just state your name. I will start your timer at 3 minutes and then step away from the microphone. And as your timer starts to tick down, you've got about 30 seconds or so left. I'm going to step back up to the podium, and that will be my visual cue that it's just about your timer is just about done, and it's almost time for the person behind you to go. But again, remember, I think we're going to have opportunity for folks to chime in more than once tonight. So at this point in time, I'm going to call up the first speaker, Mr. Chris George. Miss Chris George, I'm not sure. Chris George, you've signed up to speak. Okay, we'll see if there's another. Paul Changus. Paul, we'll start with you, sir. If you would, please state your name, and I'll start the timer when you do.
I'm Paul Changus. I'm a semi-retired educator, 45 years working in research, assessment, and evaluation. 12 of those years at the state level, last 25 years with Metro Nashville Public Schools. And first, let me say I appreciate the challenge that you have in putting together a fair and equitable accountability system. It's not a level playing field. Our students come to us at very different places in terms of past experiences, prior achievement. The resources available, the funding available to schools varies. Years ago, when I was at the state level, one of my responsibilities was an annual report that we published on the academic performance of Tennessee school districts and the state as a whole. And I oversaw that report. And when I first got there, initially we were administering nationally normed and achievement tests and criterion referenced achievement tests in other grades. And we were basically providing one list of school districts and one list of schools based on one-time measures of achievement. And year after year, the same districts, same schools kept appearing toward the top of the list because over half of the variation in performance was due to socioeconomic factors. It was highly correlated with free reduced lunch numbers at that time. Unfortunately, not a lot has changed. I recently downloaded state level, school level TCAP scores and school level economic disadvantage data and found correlations that showed that still over half of the variation in a one-time measure of achievement can be accounted for by factors outside of school control. For that reason, and I know that we have to have those achievement measures and they're important, but I would heavily emphasize the growth measures if we want a fairly level playing field in terms of evaluating schools. I had the opportunity several years ago, about a decade ago, to work on a performance lead a team that worked on a school performance system for Metro Nashville. And we had one-time measures of achievement, but we put more emphasis on value-added scores and on growth measures, increases in proficiency over time. That is the fairest system, in my opinion. We also tried to get input from our different stakeholders. We had survey data on school climate that included students and educators. We wanted to bring survey data from parents into the picture. I hope that that's something we can look at in the future to have the voice from our different stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Changas. Those were very thoughtful comments, and I appreciate you chiming in. Semi-retired, but not quite there yet, huh? Thank you very much for your comments, sir. It looks like the next person to speak is Francisco Moreno. Francisco Moreno. Oop, there goes the timer. Yes, sir, I see you. We're going to bring a microphone to you. And if you would, please, when you get the microphone, state your name, and I'll start the timer when you're ready.
So my name is Francisco Moreno, and I didn't really sign up to speak, but since I'm giving the opportunity. So I'm an immigrant. I came here not speaking English, and I learned English, and now I'm a proud Tennessean. I'm a citizen, and I wouldn't want the scored letters to be diluted down or watered down by the ability to speak, because then as an immigrant, I would look at the scores and I would be like, oh, this school says that it's a B school, but in reality, it's not that the students have growth and achievement, it's just that the score is being pushed up because there's too much of a population that arrive without knowing English. But you see, I had to learn English. And every job I've ever had, I had to speak English. And so speaking English, it's critical. And I wouldn't want other immigrants like me to be deceived by a score which waters down the real achievement of the school just because that school happens to have a foreign-speaking population. Kids are very quick to learn, and you will find that most of us immigrants learned English very quickly, either through the school or through our friends, whatever. The point is, we need to convey, especially to immigrant populations, which are less informed and often less sophisticated about TCAS scores and other complex things, and just give them a letter, A, B, C, D, or F, that they can easily understand and that they know is not watered down. That's all my comment. Thank
you very much, Mr. Reno. I appreciate those comments. And I think, when we think about the comments that have been made, it's like, okay, if this is going to be communicating something to parents, it's definitely complex, it's complicated, and we've got to make it meaningful and as simple and easy to understand as possible. And also, we want to make it as fair as possible, too. And so I think that's definitely a little bit of the challenge that we're here tonight, and I appreciate the two comments that have pointed that out so far. The next person who has signed up to speak is Adrienne Battle. I see you there. You've got to check by your name, ma'am. If you would, please just say your name and go ahead and start when you're ready, Director.
Good afternoon. Adrienne Battle, Director of Metro Nashville Public Schools. Really, my comments are pretty simple, and that is around just accountability. For myself and my colleagues and the community that I serve, there's just not anyone who's going to hold us more accountable to the outcomes for our students than we are. A point of emphasis here is that I stand before you as an educator, classroom teacher, principal, someone who has been impacted by the district that I serve. And I know the critical importance of accountability and moving the needle forward for our students, both in growth and achievement. But as a principal here in the state of Tennessee, just gleaning very specific, intentional experiences around what it takes in order to move both achievement and growth measures forward. We just need to be very careful around how we build this framework to really promote the behaviors and intentionality, the continuous improvement that brings school teams and school communities together to make sure that our mantra is every student is known, that every student is known in the letter grades and the numbers, so that students can see a path towards success, so that educators can see a path towards success. And so just wanted to emphasize and double down on the need for growth measures to also be a part of this system. That brings me to my concern with the proposed A through F letter grade system. We want to just make sure that it's sufficient in acknowledging the hard work, the progress, the unique learning needs of the students that we serve, so that we can make sure that they're prepared for college, for career, and for their life experiences. We want to make sure that we're avoiding, and this is a very difficult, complex conversation, I understand, but that we're avoiding pushing further challenges to the process of moving forward, and how we're going to be supportive in the accountability. Again, I want to reiterate, no one's going to be more accountable to our students than the many, many thousands of educators that serve across the state of Tennessee, and more specifically, the 12,000 employees that serve in MNPS. So I just wanted to urge you all to consider the factors as you deliberate on the adoption of the letter grade system, recognizing growth of our students, and as you're considering the non-academic measures, that growth should be a part of that system as well. So again, none of the educators I work alongside are afraid of accountability. We are in this business because we want the best for our students. We just want to be clear about what those metrics are, making sure that we have that goalpost set ahead of a school year so that we know what we're all collectively working towards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Battle. I appreciate your comments. Right, y'all are keeping it right on time. I can't believe it. And I do appreciate that this is a complicated conversation. And I think one of the things that you highlighted really well in your comment is kind of the inherent tension between academic achievement and growth. We were at another town hall and had a parent say something about, isn't growth an achievement? And I think that is a great example of just how jargony this can get very quickly, and we want to make sure that we're being clear with parents and the public. But the other thing I'll mention is, when you think about academic achievement, you might have someone who has mastered all of the standards, and that student would still be able to grow. But you also see where students come into a school and they might be 1, 2, 3, maybe more than that, grade levels behind in terms of knowing what they should know based on those academic standards and our high expectations for our students. And so there's been some commentary at other town halls about when you see a school community that is able to take students who are particularly behind expectations and need a lot of support to become proficient in a particular subject matter area, could there essentially be a bonus or some consideration in the A through F calculation that recognizes the work that has happened in those schools in particular? So I'll thank you, ma'am, for your comment there. I'm going to go back. Chris George. Is Chris George here? Would you like to speak? I see. No? Okay. I'll mark your X with another X. Okay, we are going to go next to Stephen Million. Stephen, if you would raise your hand, sir. You've got a check next to your name to speak. Nope, okay. Brianna Summers, if you would please. Yes, ma'am. I see you over here. We're going to bring you a microphone. And if you would state your name, go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank the department and Chelsea for this opportunity for public comment. My name's Brianna Summers. I work with the Education Trust Tennessee, an organization focused on supporting students of color, students from low-income backgrounds, students with disabilities, and English learners. And we also have an alliance of over 80 partners statewide. After reviewing the ESSA accountability system and speaking with local and federal experts, as well as our community partners, we're excited to share public comment today. And there's two pieces we'd like to uplift, some of which we've heard a little bit about so far. One is around prioritizing growth, and the second one is around evaluating schools meaningfully and fairly. First, it's critical that we continue to prioritize growth with at least the same weight that we're currently using to make sure that we're monitoring improvement in all schools. And we've heard this from town halls across the state, and Dr. Chang has mentioned this, but proficiency is highly correlated with socioeconomic status, and it can create negative incentives to focus on certain groups of students versus all of our students. On the other hand, growth accounts for differences in student demographics as well as school effects and can create positive incentives for all of our teachers and schools to work hard towards the accountability system. Next, I want to talk about evaluating schools meaningfully and fairly. Currently, our A through F system provides an additional 40% weight for how well they're serving student groups, including certain groups of students of color, students with disabilities, English learners, and students from low-income backgrounds, and we highly recommend continuing that practice. While listening to town halls across the state, it's clear that our partners and Tennesseans want an accountability system that accounts for student circumstance, and that current additional 40% is a step in the right direction. Our second piece is around revising the A to F ratings to include all of our schools. The current F rating is reserved for priority schools, which is our Title I schools who primarily serve low-income students, and also schools with low graduation rates. However, we recommend revising the A to F system to fully include the spectrum of all schools, and this can accomplish a couple things: fully increasing meaningful differentiation as required under ESSA, knowing that we're using everything from A to F for all of our schools. Can also increase fairness for Title I schools and the hopes of it increasing stakeholder transparency. We've heard from a lot of folks the confusing nature between like F being pulled out of the accountability. We're encouraged to hear that sub-ratings might be included in the accountability system. Because ratings for each indicator, for example, a school could be doing an incredible job serving their English learners, and we should absolutely celebrate that, but they might need some additional support for chronic absenteeism. And so providing that sub-rating in addition to the final rating, it can celebrate strengths, identify areas of improvement, and again, further differentiate to create a more nuanced picture. For our full analysis, you can check us out on Twitter/X at EdTrustTN. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Summers. I appreciate your comments. And I think you've highlighted a couple things that we've heard through other town halls, and it's related to the subgroup component of your comment. We heard actually from a school leader at a different town hall who was talking about excellence in serving any particular subgroup, and especially those where we might not see as much success amongst that particular subgroup. Is there a way that this calculation could essentially spotlight or highlight where schools are, they have found the secret sauce, right? They have got something going on in that school that is really working for a particular subgroup or moving achievement, moving growth, moving both. Is there a way that this could essentially spotlight those components? And I think on the flip side, we've heard some comments about kind of the darker corners where we see strong achievement kind of or strong growth at a holistic kind of way, like across the district, across the school, but we still see some gaps and we see some needs in a particular subgroup of student in that same campus. So I appreciate the comments that you made, ma'am. Just wanted to call that out. I'm looking down at the folks who have marked a check for yes, and I think I've exhausted those who are on the list. I also know I have a lot of familiar faces in this room with folks I'm sure who have some additional commentary. So I want to open up the floor. If there are others who would like to provide some comment tonight, I see you, sir, in the back. We're going to bring you a microphone. If you would please just state your name, and I'll start the timer when you start.
Thank you. I'm Mason Bellamy. I'm the Chief of Academics and Schools here in Metro Nashville Public School System. So thank you for taking the time tonight. I have a couple concerns and a follow-up question. My first concern is around the timing. As you mentioned in your presentation, this has been a law since 2016. Multiple times we've gone to implement, and originally the implementation was going to be done on a basis where the school systems and schools received a letter grade almost privately for the first year, and it would be released after the schools had a chance to see how the system worked, how it was determined. Again, I'm referring to almost 7 years ago now. And so now that we have the testing debacles behind us and that we have data coming on a regular basis, there seems to be a rush to put a model in place without any of us really understanding what it's going to be and getting that first report card in a more public manner. And so that's a little concerning to me in that this law has been a law for 7 years now, and now there seems to be a rush to implement in a way that wasn't the case originally. And so would love to hear more from the department about their timing and why now in that regards. The second one's on the AMO methodology. We all agree and we know that the law says achievement and growth have to be involved in the law. I would encourage the department to consider their AMO methodology as a fair method of achievement currently. We've heard some comments that they feel like that might be measuring growth twice. I don't believe that to be the case. I believe when you set an achievement target and you're making adequate progress towards that target, then you're making gains in achievement. And I would like to see a model that continues to do that. To just set a baseline model for proficiency leaves us in a place where we are measuring primarily socioeconomic status or possibly where a student came to us rather than where we leave them. And I think some of that leads into my follow-up question, which might alleviate some of these fears, is will the state be releasing their model and then allowing for feedback after that release? Or will the state take this feedback, create a model, and then the first option we will get is when we see what that model. So I would encourage the state to increase another feedback period after they release a model so that we could see what feedback was listened to, how that system was created, and how it will be implemented. Beyond that, thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bellamy. I appreciate those comments, and we'll try to get to all of them. So the first component is kind of around timing and why now, and this actually connects a little bit to a previous comment about, after the start of school, why are we looking at the calculation now? There is annually an accountability protocol. It's a very technical document that our agency puts out, provides to schools and districts, usually ahead of the school year, that gives exactly kind of the metrics and the calculations against which those schools or districts might be held accountable. And in the past, we have really worked very hard to make sure our federal requirements and our state requirements for accountability systems speak to each other, that they are all comprehensively outlined in that accountability protocol. And as some of you in this room may know, we've been working with the U.S. Department of Education to come into compliance with some of the findings that they found from a number of years back. Some of those pieces and some of those federal pieces of approval that we continue to wait on actually impact the AMO pathway as an example. We've talked to the feds quite a bit about it. We continue to, and we are awaiting their approval and are hoping it's going to come very soon. But in terms of implementing the state law, it has been a number of years since this one has been passed. We are at a point in time now where we have emerged from the pandemic. We know that our state has invested quite a bit of money. Our General Assembly and our governor together have come forward to put in place supports for students. And as you mentioned, we've got data now that we can use. And so we are going to be implementing for the first time this fall. And we'll be publishing that on the state report card, which is an annual website kind of tool where you can go and get lots of information about a school or a district, about the student demographics, about their teachers, about their staffing, accountability metrics. As I mentioned, the assessment results are actually on that same report card now as well. And so that's kind of one component I wanted to make sure to mention. The last question I know you had, and I might be missing one in the middle, but it was about transparency and what are we going to do and after these town halls are over. And I'm happy to kind of give you a sense of what that timeline is going to look like. It is a quick one. We acknowledge that. But we are going to move into kind of a period where we have folks in groups, working groups, actually come together and review the public feedback, evaluate what we have heard from Tennesseans all across the state, and actually kind of make the sausage, right? We're going to look through all of the different public comments, have those working groups together, determine the priorities, knowing that the academic achievement proficiency measure and the growth measure must be included. Everything else, what rises to the top, what is going to be included, and how will those things be prioritized. Every step of the way, we are going to be posting information. So just like you can see all of the town halls online, you can go and watch them online. We'll do the same for those working groups. We'll post all of the materials. There will also be, of course, a release or a publication of the calculation prior to the letter grades being run, the data being run to generate the letter grades. In addition to that, we're going to make sure that our schools and districts have a chance to look at the result of that calculation prior to it being public so that they can get acquainted with what that letter grade system has produced for their schools, double check that all of that looks right, that the data is correct, that there has not been an inadvertent error, and that they can prepare for the public launch as well. So yes, sir, we'll be very transparent. The final thing I'll say on that, and the commissioner mentioned this at a different town hall, but this is not necessarily a one and done. I mean, this is a conversation we are having now because we want to be able to implement this law fairly and meaningfully in a way that achieves some kind of rating communication tool for parents and the public, but certainly always open to learning and improving as we go, as I know many of the folks in this room, our teachers think that way, our students think that way, and we certainly think that way at the agency. I think I got your questions, but if I missed one, we'll definitely come back to you. I see your hand, ma'am. We'll bring you a microphone. If you would, please just state your name, and then when you're ready, I'll start your timer.
Renata Perry, I'm the Chief of Innovation with Metro Nashville Public Schools. And really my question is in response to your comments just a few minutes ago. You stated that there will be working groups. Are those working groups inclusive of all stakeholders across Tennessee? And who are they, the transparency? How can we push our comments and feedback to them as well?
Happy to address that. And I'm going to go ahead and flip forward to this slide so that you can see the email address. We've actually had a lot of folks along these public town halls say, please sign me up. I want to be in a working group. So folks who want to be involved, feel free to let me know that at the end of the meeting. It will be a kind of a diverse mix of stakeholders. We certainly want to ensure that members of the public are included in this. It is parents, it is teachers, it is principals, it is directors of schools, it is county commissioners actually, and school board members have kind of indicated, hey, I want to be involved. We've heard from legislators. So there's been a lot of folks who have kind of raised their hands. We will be doing very public communication about who those members are. And again, as I mentioned, we'll be putting forward all of the meeting so that people can actually watch that and follow along. The other thing I'll point out is this email address up here. We are seeking public comment all along the way. This is the email account which you can email at any time as much as you want to kind of ensure that your comment gets in ahead of the working group sessions, but along the way they will be seeking feedback and we will be sharing that publicly as well. That email account is schoollettergrades@tn.edu. So if you want to kind of get in before the working groups begin, you can email us by September 15th. But we'll have other opportunities as we kind of march through this fall and ahead of implementation for lots of public comment. And we want to be transparent about what those working groups are talking about and kind of their deliberations and their work. Others? Okay, I see 4 hands that just went up. I saw yours. Yes, ma'am. We're going to bring the microphone to you, and then we might go right back behind your row, and then we'll come back over to this side. If you would state your name, and I'll start your timer when you start.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jeannie Pupa-Walker. I'm with the Education Trust in Tennessee. Thank you for hosting a town hall in Nashville. So, Chelsea, I just wanted to get some clarity. So you're saying that this A to F system only requires achievement and growth, but the federal law requires an additional indicator of school quality, an English language proficiency measure, and graduation rate. So my question for you is the accountability system that the federal government requires going to be completely separate from A to F? And if so, the federal accountability system requires also some kind of ratings system. So will districts now be held accountable for 2 different rating systems? And what is that signaling to superintendents about what they're supposed to prioritize? And what is that signal to parents about what they should be paying attention to? I'm curious then also if A to F has to be approved through statute or not. Currently it is in statute, and so would that require a change in statute to approve a new A to F system? I think those are all of my questions. I also think we would also love to see some kind of college readiness measure. Students stop being tested basically in 9th grade according to sort of ESSA accountability, and we would love to see something like Ready Grad stay in place. So those are my comments.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. I'm going to turn your timer off. Okay, so yes, ma'am. The first component about federal versus state, and I mentioned that accountability protocol. I mentioned waiting on kind of federal approval. We've been working with them, and we are continuing to work with them to get into compliance, to get approval on the kind of this federal requirements for accountability. The law that we're here talking about tonight is a state law. And as I mentioned, in the past, we have done a really concerted effort to make sure that these systems essentially kind of talk to each other, that they are not pulling in opposite directions. Our intent is that this will be consistent somewhat with the federal system, but it does exist as a state law. It is not necessarily tied to federal accountability. It can exist separately. The other thing I'll say, when you think about federal accountability system, there's stuff that comes with designations. And so if you think about schools or districts that may be designated as in need of support in the federal accountability model, that generates additional funding, additional steps that school or district could take to try and see the improvement that they want to see. this state law does not in and of itself require a next step, right? There's not additional funding, there's not additional planning that must happen. And so that's been a conversation we've had internally at the agency. What can we do as the Department of Education after these letter grades are published to ensure that we're supporting all of our schools in the districts that need that support? Your second question, I just had it and I lost it. Statute, yes. Would it require a change in statute? And you also mentioned about the other indicators. Thank you, ma'am. So yes, achievement is named kind of in law, very, very point blank in one bullet. Growth is the second one. And the third one is essentially other indicators as determined by the department. And so that's what we're really seeking feedback from Tennesseans on, is what else should matter, what does matter to you from your vantage point as a stakeholder, whether you're in the school community, whether you're a parent, whether you're just a taxpayer, and invested in making sure our schools are successful. There certainly can be adjustments at the legislative level and in state code with the Tennessee General Assembly. Our agency is simply tasked to implement the laws that are passed, and so if there are actions taken by the General Assembly, then we would implement according to the laws that they passed. But there could potentially be conversation about that moving forward. That's not any conversations that we're having actively, but we'll see what the future holds. We are here to kind of implement the laws that the General Assembly is able to pass forward, so we'll continue to do that. Did I forget another one? Okay, we're going to go back here. Yes, ma'am. If you would please state your name and go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Ashley Gish, and I am a parent here in MMPS and also a former MMPS student. I just want to speak from a parent perspective tonight. I have really appreciated a lot of the comments on emphasizing growth, and also really want to highlight the comment around providing sub-rating scores and more detail. I think it would be nice to have, of course, more visibility and accountability that we can really easily access, but I think parents want nuance. We want to understand the whole picture of a school and how they're performing, and so I think really showing that in a detailed way would be much more helpful for parents. Really, I as a parent want to see how a school is going to serve my child as a whole person and not just the achievement scores. And so I think some additional metrics that I haven't seen mentioned here tonight is really looking at family engagement in schools. How are we measuring the ways that families are brought into the school community and invited in to be active participants? I think also services for students with disabilities and learning differences. How not only are those services being provided, but what's the quality of those services? I spoke to my mom today, who was a school nurse for 22 years, and her school became known as the public school that really served students with disabilities well. And so they really had a tougher job in many ways of providing more and more services for those students. And so I don't want a school to look as if maybe their achievement scores aren't as good when they're doing really incredible things, like you said, within those subgroups. So I really want that to be visible. And then I think the final thing I would mention is the access and quality to mental health services and social and emotional learning for students. I think that's more important than ever, not only as just recognizing our students as whole people, but also providing the safety that we expect as parents in schools. That's it.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ms. Gish, for your comments. I saw two hands over here. I saw you, Dr. Luna, and there was another hand that went up. I see you, ma'am. Yes, we'll come to you next. If you would, please, Dr. Luna, go ahead and start now. State your name for me, and I'll start the timer when you start.
Good evening. I'm Jean Lunavetter. I'm Director of Schools for Clarksville, Montgomery County. And so a few points I wanted to add, definitely focusing on that growth and achievement balance. I think several points have already been mentioned about how important that is. I think the other point we can't forget is our higher achieving schools. So some of our higher achieving schools, if we are remiss on the growth, what is actually happening in those buildings? We're actually lowering the standards, we're lowering the rigor, and so when we're looking at higher achievement schools, some of those will have an A automatically with little to no effort. I also want to think about what this looks like in the divide of our teachers. So if I am a teacher and I know my school has absolutely no chance at scoring an A, it's going to be very difficult to go to that building every single day and work with students that I know are not going to receive that recognition at the end. So what is that going to look like? And are our better teachers automatically going to go to those schools with the higher achievement? Right now, I feel like with growth, many of our teachers love that challenge, and they love being able to know that they can be a high achieving, they can be a reward school. No matter what. So I don't want any school to start the year already knowing with a predetermined score. I also, the reality is we're going to focus on what's measured. That's just the harsh reality. And so while we absolutely are going to do best by our students every day, whatever you determine is going to be where the focus lies. So I would encourage you, what does that look like when we think about alignment in this state? As some of you know, I was with TDOE for a while too, so I know well what the strategic plan looks like. And it's a focus on academics, it's a focus on educators, and it's a focus on career readiness. So if we are only focused on the academics and the achievement, and we are forgetting about the educator piece, and we're forgetting about the career readiness piece, but yet we're having these state initiatives and we're talking about the importance of industry credentials and preparing our students, but yet we are only measuring achievement, I think you would be remiss. So I would just encourage definitely thinking about an alignment all the way through the state down to our buildings.
Thank you very much, Dr. Luna. I appreciate your comments. I hope it's the lady right in front. Yes, ma'am, I see you. You've got the microphone coming around the backside of you. If you would, please state your name. Go ahead and get started.
Sure. I'm Tina Stenson. I'm the Executive Director of Research Assessment and Evaluation at Metro Schools. And most of what I've heard, I was going to say, has been said already, but I do want to emphasize a couple of things. Starting with the A to F scale. A student doesn't get an A or a C. They get an A in physics and a B in calculus and a C in ELA. And it's important to know what each of those components are in order to figure out what needs to grow and what's already strong. What they get is a grade point average. I would encourage you to think about a grade point average as opposed to an overall score for a whole school with the complexity that is involved in schooling. The second thing I want to mention, Dr. Pupo Walker already mentioned, is the decoupling of the state system from the federal system. I would strongly hope you consider not doing that, because our jobs in explaining these things to parents is difficult enough. And as one of the parents said, and I'm a former parent of a public school student, like, it's important for me to know everything, right? I want to know, are they going to grow my child? If he's advanced, is he going to stay advanced? Is he not going to fall back, but not show up in any kind of achievement measure because he's already meeting the standard, so he's good, right? That's not okay with me as a parent. Similarly, if he's below, but moving to approaching, that is big news, right? That makes a big difference in his life. That's more, that is measured by TVOS, but not totally. You can have strong TVOS and poor achievement, and vice versa. Also, to echo Dr. Bellamy, the targets are extremely important. I mean, we benchmark ourselves against them all through the year. Second, what is to not discourage high-performing schools or teachers of high-performing students not to focus because they don't have anything to go for. So we do have a grading system that we've been using for many years. They were just new numbers instead of letter grades. I would encourage you to stay as close to that as possible, given that it is September and the school year has already started. Now, I know some of the federal rules have changed, but in as much as you can, please consider that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stenson, for your comments. I appreciate what you said, and certainly agree that it is a challenge to convey something meaningful when we know that there are so many things that happen at a school that create the school experience and kind of create the impact of that school on a particular student or a subgroup of students. And that's some of the things that we've heard about as we've gone along these town halls. And even comments and conversations about this law well ahead of this town hall kind of series is when you roll up things to a letter grade, we need to make sure that it's something that parents can understand, that it's representative of the values and the priorities that Tennesseans have voiced, but certainly want to be able to demonstrate what actually does comprise that particular letter grade. So we see we've got an A kind of to the point, or a B or a C. That's one very finite, discrete label, and lots of things kind of go into that. Could you actually display, for example, on the report card, scores, and you mentioned a grade point average kind of scale, some type of score or rating of the subparts of the system? Could you not display that right next to that overall letter grade? And so that's certainly consistent with a lot of the comments we've heard, both now and prior to, and I appreciate that you're pointing that out. Others who would like to chime in, feel free to go ahead and raise your hand. We'll bring a microphone to you. We're interested in hearing your comments. We've had really good discussion tonight, and I appreciate that y'all are chiming right in. Others who have input. We've heard a lot of really good stuff, and I'll actually, yes, ma'am, I see you right here. We're going to bring you a microphone. If you would please, just state your name, and I'll start the timer when you start.
Hi, Berthina Nabah McKinney, Metro Nashville Public School Board. Thank you for having this forum today. I really appreciate it and really appreciate all the feedback that we have received so far. I do have a follow-up question regarding how you comprise the groups that will be reviewing this material. Oftentimes, we have seen a strong emphasis on our rural schools being represented within those groups and less on large urban school districts. How can we ensure that we have a diverse representation that strongly includes our large urban school districts in addition to our rural school districts?
Thank you. That is actually a goal that we have and hold as well at the agency. We want to make sure that our diverse school communities are represented in those groups, just in the same way that we want to make sure all stakeholders are represented in those groups. We want to make sure that the different types of school districts, and even, to the school level, different types of school leaders are actually on this working group kind of segment of this work. It's going to be really important to us to make sure that we've got diverse perspectives across all of the working groups, and so I think what you can expect to see is a very non-homogeneous group of people on each group. For example, you can imagine one parent, one teacher, one rural school district person, one urban school district person, one legislator, one state board of education member. Those are the kinds of groups we're thinking about, and I appreciate that you were pointing that out for us, because that is certainly a goal that we have for ourselves and will aspire to achieve. Yes, ma'am, I see you. We're going to come back to you. If you wouldn't mind, state your name again for me and go ahead and get started.
I'm Renita Perry. I'm Chief of Innovation, Metro Nashville Public Schools. I just want to come back and circle back to the two accountability lists, so the federal list and the state accountability system that we're looking at. Essentially, schools are going to be working towards two lists. And when you think about that, people want to do well. We're going to hold ourselves accountable, but to be accountable to two lists, as much as we can mirror the federal guidelines, that's what we should be aligning to. I also just want to piggyback off of Dr. Stinson just a little bit when we talked about A, B, C, D, F letter grades. We have the term priority. And so priority, as we know it now, means that those schools need targeted supports and interventions. With the letter grade of F, it means that they are failing. So with your accountability system, essentially and this is what we're looking at, we want the supports. We know what to do. We've gotten schools out of priority because it's the label. The label matters. F, my school is an F, is unacceptable. And so we want to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable. We are providing the necessary targeted supports and interventions that we know that are proven, research-based to help our schools, and we can do that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Ms. Perry. Completely appreciate your comments, and I think the challenge in that state versus federal accountability, it is a challenge, and it's something that we do not want to be divorced from each other, kind of pulling in different directions. One thing that the commissioner shared at a different town hall was essentially at the end of this A through F engagement that we're doing right now, this is not necessarily a one and done, right? And once we have kind of the approvals from the federal government that we need to be able to move forward with that plan, we would ensure and work to ensure that if those systems are at odds or if there is kind of tension points between the two, that we would work to bring them kind of in more alignment. And so again, I think that kind of goes to another comment that was made. This is not necessarily the end of the road as it comes to developing the calculation. I think we're always going to look to learn lessons and make sure that we're doing things as meaningfully and as fairly for students and schools as we can. Yes, sir. We're going to bring the microphone back to you. If you would please just state your name for me again. Go ahead, get started.
Yeah, Francisco Moreno again. So I heard that, I'm not familiar with all of these metrics that were cited, but somebody said that schools already get a 40% credit, or that's what I understood. I'm sorry if I'm not using the right terminology. They get a 40% credit if they are already going in the right direction, step in the right direction, given their environment and whatnot. And I appreciate that. And I also heard about the comment about how teachers would feel if they have to go work in a C school, and But you know what? At the end of the day, to me, this is like a Yelp score. When I choose a hairdresser or a restaurant, I choose it because of the stars, or in this case, the grades. Honestly, if the people who work at the restaurant or the hairdressing school made a great effort, and they came in early to do a great work, I appreciate that. And on a human level, I can understand that. But for my children, what I want is just the best. So to me, I want an A, and I want an effort in like the losses in academics and growth. I don't want graded on a curve. Just like you probably, sorry if I make an assumption, but you might not wish to go to a hairdresser just because, they had good intentions. They just really wanted to deliver 100% of the best. No, generally, most people will go to a 5-star Yelp hairdresser. And I wish we could keep the grade schools simple so that we who are not specialists can understand where we're sending our kids. And fortunately, there's all of these federal things and metrics and whatnot, and then those who understand those can follow those. But we as parents, what we would like to see is, is it an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F? What's the story with the school? And I don't want it graded on a curve. That's just my opinion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moreno. I will say this is the first comment we've had comparing it to a Yelp rating, and I appreciate that actually, because I do think that there's some things there. You want to keep it simple, and we have heard time and time again through these public comments from parents that please don't make this something that is so complicated or so technical that it becomes meaningless to us as parents. We want to understand, we want the best for our kids, we want the best for their schools, but we want this to be meaningful, and we want it to be simple and fair. So thank you very much for your comment, sir. I see your hand back there in the blue shirt. Yes, sir. And then we'll come back to you, ma'am. If you would please say your name, then go ahead and get started.
Yes, thanks. Good evening. David Williams, Executive Officer, Teaching and Learning here in Metro Nashville Public Schools. I want to echo the growth measure, the importance of emphasizing that. So I just want to, if you're making tallies up there, you can put another one down. I really want to make one point about, I just lost my train of thought. And I had a really good point that I wanted to make. I know one of the points, and I'll try to come back to another one because it was really good, but I'll stick around. This idea of reciprocal accountability. So whatever the measures are that are, I do remember the first one before I forget. When the goals are released, is it possible, if not it should be, that every single school has a pathway to get an A? So there's not a distribution of some A's, some B's, some C's, some D's, some F's, for example. I think that's important, that it's criterion reference, that every school owns the data and their goals that they're trying to accomplish. So I think there should be a path forward, at least theoretically possible, that every school can achieve the top status, whatever that is. The second point is for reciprocal accountability, that whatever the measures are, that the State Department has resources, toolkits, resources, supports, research that says, if we're going to hold you accountable to this, this is how we can help you get there. And I don't think that's there yet. I think there are some of these measures, just looking at the ones on the screen, that do exist in some of those places, but not consistently all across the board. So I think that if the state, for example, is holding schools and districts accountable to certain things, they have a responsibility to also help us achieve those.
Thank you very much for those comments. I appreciate them. And I think the last one you made about a reciprocal accountability, we've talked a lot about that internally, and it's kind of the notion of then what after these letter grades are published, what are we going to do to show up and support? So thank you very much for your comments. Yes, ma'am, if you would state your name again for me.
Tina Stenson, Metro Schools. This one is hard to say, but I just spent 2 sleepless or 3 sleepless weeks because of the changes in the accountability metrics that came after the fact, because that's part of my job. But it's really hard to have any system, whether it's an A to F system or the federal accountability system or 6 systems, however many we have, to meet the goals of the state when we don't know what they are. And so it's really part of reciprocal accountability is that we get information about what it is we need to be doing or even collecting data on, including everything from pathways for students and which classes they're supposed to be taking before a year to 2 years to 3 years after the fact. So it's not a nice thing to say, but we cannot meet the goals unless we have the goals. And I know Dr. Battle and I know the leadership team, go above and beyond, but, these public facing systems, we really need to know what those metrics are.
Yes, ma'am. Agree. And I think your point is absolutely right. It's difficult to know what you're kind of chasing. What we do know is that this law requires academic achievement and it requires growth. And so those are 2 components that must be included in the calculation. We're required to include them, and so we will include those goals. Other indicators is a little bit more of a white space. It's kind of where we're looking and really seeking a lot of input about the other things that could or should matter in a calculation. So thank you very, very much for your comments. I saw your hand here. Yes, ma'am. Hope it's right over here, kind of on this end of the row. If you would, please, ma'am, state your name. Go ahead and get started when you're ready.
I'm Sarah Chin. I'm also with MNPS. And I just want to echo a lot of what I've been hearing tonight around this conversation around growth and prioritizing growth. I think it's so important to just even pull back and think about why is it that a student in poverty might, as we see across the country, replicated in every school in the country, why is it so much harder for a student who's in poverty to have objectively high achievement levels compared to a student who's not in poverty? I think it's really important that we just start from that fundamental orientation of why is that true? Because it helps us understand what we need to hold schools accountable for and what do we need to accept as outside of their locus of control. So, for example, the research is very clear that students in poverty come into kindergarten behind relative to students who are not in poverty on readiness indicators. Before any school system or any school has even had access to them, they're already starting behind. And in light of that, what we want to encourage and support and challenge our schools to do is promote that growth, because that's the part that schools have authority over it, have the capacity to change. We want to push and challenge our schools to do. I was just sitting here and I don't want to overly torture the haircut metaphor, but just really push on why I believe elevating growth is not about grading schools on a curve, but it's actually about holding them accountable for what they are responsible for once a kid comes to them and is in their school. So again, to torture the haircut metaphor, it's saying, I'm not going to hold the hairdresser accountable for the fact that I got really bad sleep last night and my hair is broken, I have split ends. lens. I can't hold you accountable for that, but I can hold you accountable for the fact that what happens once I am in your shop, that is what you need to be accountable for as well. So again, I'm just really wanting us to focus here on why are these separate conversations? It's because we have to orient our schools and challenge them and focus them to hold themselves accountable for what they're responsible for once the students are in their school that day.
Thank you very much for your comments, and that's really consistent with some of the other comments we've heard along the town halls, and it's kind of what is in the locus of control of a school at a principal level, at a school building level. What are the indicators that they can actually control, and kind of the socioeconomic circumstances when we've heard about that in terms of other subgroups of students with disabilities, students who are English learners. We've also heard some really nuanced input. There's one up here about chronically out of school, and do we count an excused absence? Do we count an unexcused absence? Do we count both? And so kind of this notion of if we are measuring via a rating system a performance or an impact of a school, what are the things that are in that school's control? So I appreciate the comments that you made there, ma'am. Others who would like to contribute any input, interested in hearing what you might have to offer, feel free to just raise your hand. I see you. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I saw you back there first. Hey, how are you doing? We're going to come to you, ma'am, and then we'll come back up here to you, sir. If you would please state your name for me and go ahead and get started.
Hi, Erin O'Hara Block, also on the Board of Education in Metro, and used to actually run accountability for the state of Tennessee. And so when we did this years and years ago, I know we've talked a lot about the focus on academic achievement and on growth. I want to get a little bit particular about this, and I heard Dr. Bellamy talk about it earlier. But when we talk about academics, if we're just talking about a proficiency level, and we're not talking about growth and proficiency, then I don't think we're serving students well. Because as folks have said over multiple times tonight, and I know over multiple of these occasions in the state, what gets measured gets done, and I heard Dr. Luna say this earlier. And the idea that we need to focus on the growth of every student every day is a really important one. And if you just have a flat proficiency level, people can just worry about pushing kids over that. Bubble kids, it came about as part of No Child Left Behind as a term that was used, and it's not effective for kids. Dr. Stenson said it earlier, when a student moves from below to achieving, that's a huge achievement. And that should be just as important as moving a student from a high level achievement to a higher level of achievement. So whether or not that's done through growth as measured by TVOS or growth as measured by gains in academic achievement, you can actually have both of those things. So academics can mean growth in academic achievement in addition to the measure that we're all used to around growth, which is the TVOS growth. So I think we cannot emphasize that point enough, that it's not about trying to figure out, is this school an A because all these kids came in this place and all these kids came in this place. It's about growing every student every day, no matter where they are. And to the extent that we lose that motivation for schools and districts, and I think that's a real shame. I had something else I wanted to say too, but...
You can come back. That's totally fine. We can come back.
Oh, I have a question for you, actually.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry, I know there was like a time limit or something. Soccer got me here late. I'm interested in this idea, I know the federal government, and I know you're talking about decoupling the two systems, but I know the federal government requires that we have this kind of input on federally related systems. I know you all are doing that now from the state perspective, but the other thing the federal system always requires, and whether or not the two are decoupled, I think it's just the right thing to do, is that reaction as well to the feedback. And so how will we actually know that there has been, because I've heard overwhelming comments around this idea of growth, and growth as, the way I've described it. How are we going to know that you all have listened to that?
Thank you very much for your comments and your question. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but after this public town hall period, we are moving into kind of a working group session to actually review all of the public comment, to deliberate, to determine the calculation. Just like these town halls are posted in public, those working group conversations will be recorded, will be posted, will be public, as well as the agendas, the meeting minutes, all of the materials that kind of go along with that. I also mentioned earlier that we are going to be able to provide the results results of that working group session, what is the calculation, ahead of what is the result of the calculation, right? So if we develop a calculation for A through F, here's what it is, and then later on actually be able to say, here is the letter grade that your school generated via this calculation. We do things with school districts regularly about kind of appeals, embargo windows, that sort of thing. And so ahead of publication of the state report card this fall, where the letter grades will be published for the first time, you will see our agency engaging with schools and districts in that way. But you'll certainly be able to see very transparently all of the action that happens kind of in those working groups. You're also able to contribute comment to them. The other thing I'll say is that earlier in this town hall, I mentioned that there have been folks kind of along our stops in this tour who have asked to be a part of those working groups, and we have certainly taken signups kind of as we've gone along. And so if there are folks who are in the room tonight who want to be involved, you are more than welcome to. I see your hand already. Yes, ma'am, we'll put you on the list. But that's an invitation that I'll make available to us. We're going to come to you, sir. If you would, please state your name. Go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Thank you. Sean Braystead, I work at MNPS as well. I do communications, not necessarily education, but from that lens, I just want to say that I understand fully that, a lot of us in the public sector have to implement laws we don't always agree with. The past few years have shown that quite a bit. But I think that to the extent that once this is rolled out, once this is implemented, my request is that the TDOE, the governor, the state legislature that put together this law or this system will help to make sure that students and staff at those schools are not put into a demoralizing spiral downward, because I think there are several studies that show that labeling like this, labeling someone an F or labeling them as failing, is only going to further deteriorate the quality of education they're going to receive. It's going to demoralize their sense of self-worth, and that's why I think the language and Chief Perry has talked about the fact that the intentionally use the word priority, and now we're going to an intentionally negative frame around these schools. And so just as this is rolled out, whatever help you can give districts, whatever help you can give just in terms of media outreach, in terms of public outreach, to make sure that these kids, these teachers, these families know that they're not stuck in a failing school, that there's going to be additional supports. We hope there's going to be additional supports that will help them to further their growth and progress.
Thank you very much, sir, for your comments. And yes, that's the then what piece we were talking about earlier. Then what? What are we going to do as a department to show up for districts and schools? And I know you all at the district community are thinking about that same thing for your schools and for your teachers and your families as well. And so in some ways, we're all in it together in terms of implementing this law as we move forward through the fall. But I appreciate very much what you said, and I think we will look forward to working with folks like you as we move through and actually get ready to publish this information and talk about it with our constituents, with our stakeholders, with the parents and the mamas and daddies in our schools. I thought I saw another hand over here. I might have been imagining something, but others who would like to chime in, feel free to go ahead and raise your hand. I will also give this group huge kudos because you have gotten way further along without me having to kind of pull comments out of you tonight. So I appreciate how active our discussion has been. Yes, ma'am, we're going to bring you a microphone. If you would just state your name one more time for me and go ahead and get started.
Sorry, Erin O'Hara Block. You mentioned appeals, which is interesting. When Dr. Bellamy asked a question earlier about will there be a chance to see the calculations before they're released, that actually was even before the law was written, and this was a discussion that was always part of the plan, was to issue a grade, as he said, and give it a year and give people a chance to get used to it, see how the calculations work, et cetera. Will there be an opportunity for appeals, and maybe this has already been asked, but of the data that goes into the letter grades themselves, how that's done, and how will that work if your goal is to get this released by November?
Good question. Yes, the short answer is yes, there would be an appeals window. So currently districts and schools are completing appeals right now. There's actually kind of two waves of appeal work that is happening this fall. If this public engagement period generates new indicators that are somehow outside the data sets that we're already collecting and checking with districts, if there is a new indicator, then yes. Then yes, that would trigger another appeals window. And again, I mentioned we know the timeline is tight and that's going to be a challenge, but we certainly would not move forward with a data point that has not been vetted essentially against the district's perception or expectation of what that data would look like. So if there is a new data point that somehow exists kind of outside of the data that we collect and are already going through an appeals process for, we would institute that prior to the inclusion of the data point in the letter grade system.
I guess actually what I meant is the calculation itself. So occasionally, never happened under my watch, that was sarcasm, but we do make mistakes when we're calculating even a new system. So maybe the appeal window has been open for the underlying data, but will there also be an appeal window for the calculation itself? I mean,
yes,
people do make mistakes, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So,
That's
thanks.
right. And essentially what that does is, it looks like, a district is expecting this data, these students to be represented in some calculation and some human error or computer error sometimes too. It leaves folks off, or it accidentally includes students who should not be included. And so that's a really important process that we go through with districts to make sure that the data is actually what the data should be. So yes, there would be. Others who would like to chime in and provide public comment, I will flag that we've got about 15 minutes left of time. So if you're thinking about jumping in, you've still got 15 minutes of opportunity. Want to make sure to prompt you and encourage you to chime in tonight. Others who would like to provide some comment as we move forward with this implementation. We've heard a lot of good stuff here tonight. I appreciate it. Others who want to jump in. I might take this opportunity to prompt us to think about some of the components of a calculation that could apply maybe at an elementary or a middle or a high school level. That's been something that's been pretty consistent throughout the other town halls, so I'll mention that and kind of probe and prompt your thinking there if there's anything that comes to mind. We've heard a little bit about kind of comparing apples to apples, and I think that has come through a little bit in some of the school context. We know that no two schools are the same, and some have different subgroups of students where maybe there's really wonderful work and excellence happening. We want to make sure to emphasize and highlight that. Other thoughts or folks who want to chime in? Yes, ma'am, we see you again. I'm going to ask you to say your name. I apologize. I know who you are, but please go ahead and say your name and get started.
Hello, I'm Tina Stenson again, and I apologize for not shutting up. I think somebody has mentioned this, but I'm getting a bunch of meetings conflated. I think Ms. O'Hara Block mentioned it, but also growth in terms of the non-academic indicators. That it's not just that you have X attendance, it's that you are increasing X attendance, that you have this much SEL, but you are increasing that. So just please continue to think that. But in terms of the appeals window, I'm already canceling a vacation in my head. Is there a way we can get the formulas and everything first? Not just have they been done right, but what are they?
Yeah.
I
understand what you mean. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much for that comment. That's a good comment. Thank you very much for that one. And the question was really about, can we get the calculation before we look at the data that goes into some unknown calculation? Yes, we would like to be able to share that with you, kind of to the point that you made earlier. We want to be able to show you what the goalposts are here. And so our goal is to complete this kind of engagement, the working group sessions, develop the calculations, show that to you, show that to others in the community, and then move forward with the actual data components that will be run through that calculation. Yes, ma'am. I see you back here. We're going to bring you a microphone. And if you would, please state your name, and I will start your timer when you start.
Hi, my name is Catherine Avila Pastor. I'm an organizer with Nashville Organize for Action and Hope, NOAA. I came in a couple minutes late, so I apologize if this has already been asked. But you keep mentioning the what then portion of this, which is what happens after these letter grades or whatever you choose are put into place. So Is it my understanding, am I understanding correctly, that you say that these working groups are going to help the state decide what then? Meaning, is the state going to provide more funding, or is the state going to provide more presence in the schools? Or is that what you're envisioning the working groups are going to do in addition to sifting through the data?
Close. So essentially what we were talking about earlier is in a federal accountability system, if there is a designation, for example, as a priority school, in the federal accountability model, that triggers extra things, extra resources, extra funding, extra supports, extra planning that is required. This state law that we're talking about for A through F letter calculation requires the rating system to be put in place, but it does not necessarily trigger anything after that. And so as an agency, the Department of Education has been talking a lot about what we are going to do to kind of come around to districts, to schools, to support them in achieving their goals and communicating about this A through F letter grade system, but essentially showing up to support as we all begin to implement and talk about this particular piece of legislation. The working groups are actually going to review public comment and deliberate essentially on outside of the two required things that we know must be included, the academic achievement, proficiency, and growth. What else have we heard through public comment? What do we believe also makes the cut and kind of goes into the calculation? How do we prioritize amongst the things that actually do make the cut? And so that's what that working group session will be focused on. I will say, if there are great ideas that we can kind of make come to life that are generated through those conversations, we are very interested in ensuring that the department can provide supports after the publication. So it might be that we have some really good ideas that we're able to follow through with. Others who'd like to chime in? I see your hand. Yes, ma'am. If you would please state your name for me.
I am Jeannie Pupo Walker. I have a quick question about rules that will be applied to a new state rating system. Will you apply rules such as participation rate requirements? Will there be reporting out by subgroup on how groups of students did for the indicators you all select, so that we know how well different groups are doing according to the A-F rating?
That has certainly been a request that we have heard even prior to the conversations about A through F letter grades. It's how can we as an agency, or how can a district or a school publish all of the information that makes up the school experience, makes up the district's experience. We know when we think about the state report card, there is lots of data on that thing, and you can kind of drill down and slice and cut the data in different ways. There are certainly components there that could be included in the A through F calculation that might already be available to you. But the thing I mentioned earlier, we've heard a lot of requests for consideration of reporting displays that essentially present that one letter grade as required by law, and then shows in a really clean, easy to understand way the components that make up that letter grade and what are the scores on those kind of subparts or sub-indicators. We heard tonight about kind of scales that could be used. GPA was a good example of how we measure students, and could that be kind of informing our thinking about how to rate the subparts or the sub-indicators. But we certainly want to be able to provide the underpinnings, the essential kind of components of what the letter grade system is, and present that data in a way that tells a comprehensive story about our schools, whether that is held in the calculation, in the A through F letter grade calculation itself, or it's other contextual information that we are able to display alongside that letter grade. We've got about 5 minutes yet left. Yes, sir, we're going to come to you next. Please state your name for me.
Hello, Hank Clay from Metro Nashville Public Schools. And Chelsea, first, thank you personally for your endurance through going across the state and being here in Nashville tonight. As we think about these systems, they're all about incentives. Our collective goal as a state is to improve student achievement, to see their growth from year to year as they advance from second to third grade, third to fourth grade, that they're making progress. As you think about incentives, one of the things I've heard from the State Department of Education previously is that you want a system that incentivizes schools and districts to be able to, they're not guaranteed, but be able to achieve an A every year. And so I think thinking about the timeline of that incentive, that I would encourage you to make it so that each year it's possible to achieve an A, that we know it's progressed year over year, but each year is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And actually, your comment triggered something I wanted to say a minute ago, and I lost track of it. But some of the things we've heard around at the town halls is, if we know we have to do academic achievement, we know we have to do growth, is there a way to essentially include or consider trends? Look at a couple of years of growth, look at a couple of years of achievement. I think to the comment earlier about growth towards proficiency, that's another component that's come up. And so thank you very much for raising that tonight with us here in Nashville. Others who want to chime in? Yes, ma'am. I see you, and I see you, and then I think we'll probably have time for one more. But go ahead and get started.
So I'll be really, really quick. So you have said twice now that for the state accountability, A through F, that there isn't any, like the federal, there's things that they respond to, So we have also been meeting with groups across the state around the turnaround framework. Where does that fit in with this?
Great question, and I think it actually illuminates just how interconnected all of these many components of an accountability system are. You think about reward schools, we were talking about lists earlier, priority designations, and that's kind of on the needs improvement side. We also see reward schools, exemplary districts, that kind of thing. There are labels, ratings at the federal level and at the state level. We want to make sure that those things are not divorced, as I mentioned earlier, and they're not kind of pulling in two different directions. The other thing I think I'd mentioned to you that we've heard in other town halls is kind of all of the different evaluation systems that exist in the state, and how are we connecting or aligning those kind of for a through line that makes them more connected maybe than they are now. The specific example that we've heard a few different times actually relates to teacher evaluations and how we are communicating to teachers about performance. Are we going to kind of create a consistent expectation at a school or a district level? So I appreciate those comments. As we're winding down, I saw another hand back here. Yes, ma'am, if you would state your name for me again.
Yes, Catherine Avila Pastor with NOAA again. A quick question. Have these town halls only been conducted in Spanish? I noticed that the form itself to submit these comments are all in English. Mm-hmm. And if we want these working groups and the information that we gather during these town halls to be inclusive of our entire state, there's a big immigrant population. I myself am Spanish speaking. How are we gathering information from non-English speaker parents, let's say, who have a lot of in stake in these schools?
Thank you very much for the question. I'm actually looking around the room to see where our Spanish translator might be. There, we have had a Spanish translator at all of these town halls just to see if there are folks who are coming who are not speaking English language in a way that they feel very comfortable with, that they are having translation of this. Same kind of goes on the flip side. Like if we have a comment that was provided in Spanish, whether that's in a vocal comment or a written comment, we would translate that so that there is kind of consistency. The other thing I will say, we've had a number of folks kind of invite us to come and host additional town halls for their group in particular. We've heard that from a number of parent groups along the way, and that's something we're definitely open to doing and would love to be able to take advantage of that. And so if that's an opportunity, maybe we can talk after this. All right, this is just about time, so we're going to go to this comment back here. Yep, it's you, Erin. Yep, it's you.
Sorry, it's like not a good one to end on, but can you talk about, we've talked a little bit about like rules and what'll end up where and how state versus federal, et cetera. Will students, have you all thought about, like, my daughter, for example, is in an advanced math course, but in a middle school. Will all students' tests at a particular school count at that school? And how is, if a student is taking a class, for example, if you're thinking about ELD students who have been, guided by state policy and practice not to be in EL1 until 10th grade or 11th grade, and then EL2 until 12th grade. Like, how are you all thinking about those kinds of rules? And then will be there an opportunity to comment on those types of things as well? Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can comment on any of this at any time, and you can email us. I will say two
things. But I can comment on what's in my head. How do I know how to comment on the rules?
It's posted publicly, and so you can actually go and read comments and then contribute more. You can iterate on what you've said before, respond to somebody else. It's open for you there, and I'll put up this. Oops.
I'm sorry. I meant like once the rules get published about how this will be conducted, will I have an opportunity to comment then as well?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I see one over here. Okay, we'll go for you, and you'll be our last comment of the evening, ma'am. Go ahead and stand up, and if you would, please state your name. I'm excited you're jumping in.
I'm so sorry. This is so much pressure. I was just curious. I was looking at some of the proposed metrics, and I was thinking things related to maybe being chronically out of school, or even things that might be more related directly to growth in academics. Students who are maybe low incident special needs students, or students who might be very have very different needs than what we think of as our traditional students. How would they be measured? Would their circumstances be completely excluded from these metrics, or would they, because they're still really important members of our school communities? And I was just kind of wondering how they fall into these metrics, because a student who might be chronically ill might not. It could be very. You understand what I'm asking?
I do understand what you're asking, and I'm actually remembering, Erin, that I did not address your comment about subjects and kind of grades where students might be taking advanced coursework. I'm going to come back to that one. In subgroups, students, we know that there could be differences in performance, whether that's an achievement indicator or a growth indicator or some other indicator that's generated by this public town hall. What we're looking to see is if this letter grade system can actually highlight where a subgroup is performing particularly well, or if there is an area where we see lots of great things happening kind of overall, but there might be a subgroup that is not performing at that level. We would love for us to be able to think about and kind of pull those things out, whether it is through this calculation or some of those contextual pieces of information. And so we want to make sure that this is fair, that this is representative of students, the hard work they're putting in, the hard work their families and teachers are putting in. The chronic absenteeism piece in particular, we've heard about unexcused absences and excused absences, and if a chronic absenteeism indicator is there, could we think about which of those two or both actually go into a calculation on chronic absenteeism? The other thing that I'll come back to the previous comment is around what is represented in terms of academic achievement and growth, especially kind of the advanced coursework. That is something that we've heard about in town halls, but even broader than that, we've heard about just general subject matter area. We know in a lot of systems, we think about English language arts, we think about mathematics. We've had people say, what about social studies? What about science? We've heard really interesting comments about how, my Algebra 1 score for my entire school actually represents the work of one teacher. And so there's been a lot of comments actually about how do we lift additional achievements, whether that is access to advanced coursework, access to additional supports like tutoring, and certainly kind of the success of students who are in those pathways. So it's kind of broad. It's like the subject matter plus that advanced coursework component that we've heard a little bit about. All right. Guys, we're 3 or 4 minutes past time. I want to deeply, deeply thank you for the lively discussion tonight. This has actually been wonderful, and I appreciate that we have filled the time with comments from folks here in Nashville. I appreciate y'all coming out. Again, please take note of this email account. It is open. We are looking for public comment. You are welcome to email us as much as you would like about any of the topics we've talked about tonight or more. New ideas that come to you over time, we'll look to review those as well. So thank you all for being here. We're going to turn you loose. I appreciate your time. See y'all soon.